If your squat hasn't increased for months, you're probably making one of these 5 mistakes that absolutely kill progress. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what those are, and hopefully you'll be hitting some PRs pretty quick. The first mistake is walking into a squat without a proper setup. If your feet are all over the place, if the bar is too high or too low, it can completely throw you off and kill your progress before you ever start. Oftentimes people lack to commit to a standardised setup. You know, maybe one week they've got their feet flared, maybe the next week they're pointing straight forward, maybe the squat's wide one week, it's narrow the next. Maybe they spend, 5 minutes in the rack just kind of dancing about, trying to make sure that their feet are entirely square, whilst wasting energy and going into it without any confidence. The fix is establishing a consistent setup. Grip the bar nice and comfortable and tight, lock the upper back and step out, kind of trying to land in your stance within about 3 steps. Don't second guess yourself. You might not be 100% correct with it. But a lot of times people spend more time adjusting themselves and throwing themselves off and kind of adding a bit of inconsistency to their stance before they ever start. And you can just never hope to progress like that because you're going to be changing it every single week and you're not going to feel confident. Pick a way of doing it and stick to it. Any tweaks can be done slowly as the weeks go on rather than trying to dramatically overhaul session to session. Just clock some time under the bar and try and progressive overload. The second mistake is cutting depth. It's very good for the ego cutting depth. There are certain people in like athletic contexts that might need to cut the depth, but 9 times out of 10, especially just for recreational trainees, you need to be hitting a squat, crease of your hip below the top of your knee. You want to at least be hitting parallel on your squat. Otherwise, you're cheating a lot of your muscles out of any kind of stimulus. It will feel hard when you do it. You might think that you're working, but the stimulus is actually going to be fairly low on your quads, on your glutes, on your adductors. It's not going to contribute as much as you think it would, and you could probably gain a lot more from just going through the full range of motion. Now, if mobility is an issue, that's something that can be worked on. I've got some other videos that kind of go more into depth about that. You're not going to get anywhere just clanging more and more plates on and hoping that, maybe my depth isn't the best, but I'm getting stronger, so hopefully I'll progressive overload and see some gains there anyway. One of the best examples of why this just isn't true and doesn't work is El Campeon. Now, this guy is an absolute hero.
Brave Italian explorer, and in this house is a hero. End of story.
Because he does some of the most ambitious stuff I've ever seen. And to be honest, I would say most guys probably can't do what El Campeon can do. This guy will, if you're not familiar, will take like 300 kilos on a squat and walk it out, which I mean is a feat in itself, and then like proceed to bend his knees like an inch. This guy recently was in like a Larry Wheels video and they had him squat to depth and he could only do about 60 kilos. It was a plate either side, that was all he could do. And it just goes to show that he's really got specific into this, loading the weight, but the stimulus is obviously clearly not came and it's clearly not carried over to anything. Mistake number 3 is having your knees cave in. Even kind of slightly, if you do this, it means that you're not really properly engaging your glutes, and your glutes are just a massive part of the movement. There's such a reason why squats kind of gain the stereotype as a glute builder. When you do this, you're relying on your quads to do all the work and you're kind of leaning on yourself structurally, so you're increasing the risk of injury. This is usually symptomatic of having weak glutes, particularly kind of weak glute medius. If you do find yourself to be someone that you can't really seem to drive your knees apart in the squat, you do find that like as you come up they're tipping together, you probably need to kind of isolate that area. A lot of times just doing other exercises that are kind of glute heavy will be enough. I know a lot of people that they'll only do like a bit of RDLs, lunges, things like that, maybe some hip thrusts, and that'll be enough for them. But if this is an area of kind of particular trouble, maybe you are already doing all those lifts and you're still struggling driving your knees apart, one of the best ones is actually the hip abduction machine. Nearly every gym's got it. You might feel a little bit silly doing it, but it is just one of the best ways of doing it, a lot of people tell you to do like the band drills and squat with a band, and that is good, kind of from like a mental aspect of knowing what to do whilst you're squatting. But I actually think that one of the best things that I've ever given people, so they can kind of understand the feeling of how to track their knees out and keep their glutes engaged on the squat the entire time, is by giving them the hip abduction machine. Warm up with that, and you'll probably be driving your knees out in no time. Mistake number 4 is poor bracing or not bracing at all. One of the kind of earliest mistakes that a lot of people make in the gym is kind of not knowing how to breathe when exercising. And a lot of times people assume that you should not hold your breath at any point, and that you're going to kind of cause yourself an injury. Now, obviously, you shouldn't hold your breath for the entire time of an exercise. But when squatting, when deadlifting, when kind of doing these heavier movements, there is going to be a portion of the lift that your breath will be held, because that's going to allow you to brace your core to the best of your ability and kind of stop you from folding over and kind of taking the tension into your back. So you don't want to be breathing willy-nilly. You don't want to be kind of holding your breath kind of in your chest. What you want to do is you want to kind of fill the air in your stomach, and then you want to kind of brace down. Not like you're kind of trying to flex your abs or whatever. It's more of a feeling akin to bracing yourself to getting punched in the stomach. Someone's going to punch you in the stomach. What are you going to do with your gut? What are you going to do with your breathing to kind of negate that impact? When you do this in a lift, you maximise stability. So the fix here is breathing bracing. You walk it out. When you're ready to descend, take a big belly breath. You really lock that pressure down, holding your breath as you descend. And then on the way up, as you're kind of cresting the top of that movement, you can then begin to release your air, rebreathe and brace at the top of the lift where you're strongest, and then go into another rep. And number 5, skipping your accessory work. Now, there's a lot of people that really kind of look at the squat and go, this is fundamentally a perfect movement. I think Tom Platz went a long way talking about how great the squat is, and it is a great movement. But with a lot of these things, as you advance, they can't really just be done in isolation, because there's many muscles, as I've mentioned previously, that make up the squat pattern. And if you just train squats to get better at squatting, you'll only get so far. I would take myself, for instance. I definitely kind of followed this advice that you got to squat more to get better at squatting. Squat's the ultimate leg exercise. And I think it's, it needs its respect. But I am a very kind of long-legged lifter. I've got a short torso and equivalently very long legs. Because of this, it means that my squat is more similar to a hinge pattern. It kind of loads my lower back and my glutes more. And it means, as a kind of training stimulus, it doesn't do an awful lot for my quads comparatively. So if I want to contribute more from my quads, just squatting over and over again is going to have that exact same ratio of glute and lower back stimulus at the front, and then maybe a little kind of secondary contribution from the quads. So what I've got to do with my accessories is look to target something that is a little bit more quad dominant. So things like front squats, leg presses, lunges, things like that are going to be a lot more helpful for getting my squat up rather than just squatting alone. If you're a kind of short-legged lifter, you've got kind of a perfect upright high bar squat, and your squat will most likely for you be very quad heavy. So you could be neglecting your posterior chin, you could be neglecting some of the glutes and the lower back, and could really benefit from things like good mornings, hip thrusts, things like that are going to target that part of the movement. Regardless of your leverages, no squat program is complete without dedicated quad and posterior chain work. You shouldn't just squat to get better at squatting. You can really benefit from incorporating a plethora of different variations that are going to help reinforce the lift. Doing some sort of front squat, doing some sort of single leg work, doing some sort of kind of posterior chain work, especially things like, good mornings that are really specific to the movement itself. A lot of people like to lean into minimalism with this stuff, especially when it comes to things like leg training, because leg training obviously sucks. But you know, a lot of times it's easy to get into, oh, I'll just need to do squats and just get good at squats and that will be enough. Time and time again with any lift, if you want to get better at it, variety does have a strong correlation of your rate of progression. A lot of times I hear people discuss, what's your desert island exercises? If you had to pick 3 exercises for the rest of your life, what would they be? Now this is obviously a fun thought experiment, and you know, definitely has its value because it lets you kind of review what is a good exercise, how much bang for my buck am I getting from doing this movement. But even that kind of mindset is quite reductive. In kind of all these scenarios, you know, nearly always more is better. You know, if you train your legs more, if you do more variety of your leg movements are going to get better because there's not going to be any kind of weak spots forming. And that carries over to all your training. However, you don't really get many people arguing about it though. You know, you don't get many guys that will say, oh, it's enough for your chest just to bench. Funnily enough, you know, these guys will absolutely be doing incline dumbbell press and doing their flies and all that. But there's a lot of people out there that I do know that will say, you know, do your squats, do your deadlifts, that's enough for your legs. And it will definitely do something for your legs. But again, you know, you're not maximising your potential here. So there you have it. That was the 5 mistakes that kill squat progress. If you can remedy these, you should be seeing PRs in no time. So let me know down below, what was your mistake? Is there any mistakes that I've missed? And is there any videos that you would like to see me cover in the future? If you liked the video, please like the video and subscribe so you can stay up to date on the very next one.